Hey guys, it's Matt from HtAG Analytics. In today's session, I wanted to talk about property data in general. You will see online a lot of discussion about being data-driven buyers agents, data-driven property investors, etc. However, there's a few nuances that we have to discuss about data. Now, I'm a big supporter of data and big believer that data can really give us sufficient information to make a decision. I always coaching my mastermind community, which is a private community. The data is actually a representation of behavior. And when we have a lot of data points to look at, we can understand how the area is behaving, what is the potential investment potential of the area, etc. The more data points you have and the more vantage points you can observe the area from, the more accurate your analysis. Even the notion of boots on the ground, I believe, can be captured in the data. I have a perfect example where I believe a couple of years ago that Taylor Hills was a great investment opportunity because it's owner-occupier dominated, and I even understood from the data itself how the area would actually look. And I went a year later and realized exactly that. You can see maintained front lawns, everything looks beautiful, people own those houses, they really take care of it. And I didn't actually find out much more information about the actual area from having the boots on the ground. I knew exactly how it's going to look from looking at the data, but we need that granular information to analyze from. Now, that putting aside, having the data itself is actually not sufficient. You could have two of the same areas, for example, that have a good yield. However, they are completely two different investment opportunities, which therefore means that in order for us to actually use data appropriately, we can't just look at the numbers themselves, okay? We first have to understand what each individual number means. Therefore, there is an abstraction layer on top of the data point to understand what it means. What kind of behavior does it represent? So a number on its own carries no judgment. That's very important. A 3.5% yield isn't good or bad until you know what it buys, what kind of risk levels the area has, what's the timing of the cycle within which the area is moving, what is the market depth that supports it, etc., etc. So just yield on itself, a lot of people are now interested in yield because of budget changes. Yield on its own is not sufficient. We have to lay additional factors on top to understand whether an area is a good investment opportunity or not. And this is best encapsulated in our, for example, overall RCS risk score, which is a relative composite score. It takes into account 80 metrics and then scores these metrics across multiple domains, whether it's risk, capital growth, cash flow, and overall score. Now we have a much more robust way of comparing areas, which is called DEX comparison module, and you can rank areas across 200 metrics and assign significance to metrics which you believe are very important for you to realize your goals. But RCS risk score, because it takes into account 80 metrics, is a perfect way that highlights how a couple of areas that might have the same yield are completely different investments. So for example, same yield, but 55 points between the best and the worst for a relative composite score out of 100. So Orange has 81, Bendigo has 65, Logan Central 26, and Elizabeth, South Australia 27. Okay? Now, in addition to yield, when we dig deeper, we realize that there is certain quality of the risk that the area carries. So for example, Orange lower risk score is 93, and lower risk score is also an RCS score that takes into account all of the metrics that encapsulate the area's risk, whether it's industry diversification, exposure to negative environmental effects, hold periods, volatility, error rates. There is a lot of data there that we look at to understand, okay, will this area be volatile? Will it surprise us? Will it have a large downside, which means that we'll be holding a liability as opposed to an asset? And you can see a huge difference between Orange and Logan Central, for example. Then there is the cycle position. Is the area at the top of the cycle, which means that yes, we'll generate meaningful returns in the 1 to 2 years, but then the area will subside and will stagnate for 5 or 6 years and will not be making any money during that time. So it means, is it in the late position of the cycle? Is it early in the cycle? Okay, then market depth, and this is very important, velocity. So market depth is usually used to assess your ability to sell that asset after holding it X amount of years. And certain markets have different depths. So Orange has 970 sales a year, while Elizabeth has 21. Completely two different market depths, while all of these suburbs actually have the same yield. And if we are chasing yield, it is important, as I mentioned, to look further, to combine the metrics into a narrative. So the decision leaves three rungs up. So you have the raw data, which is prices, rents, listings, yield. Sorry, you have the raw data, which is prices, rents, and listings. Then you have extrapolation of that raw data, which is analytics. So you have yield, growth rate, stays on market. Then you have property intelligence, scored, rank, risk calibrated, signal you can act on. Okay, and this is extremely important. Some of these analytics or metrics, they have different weightings on the basis of what we are trying to do. So in order for us to produce property intelligence, we need to first understand what our brief is and what we are trying to do. For example, if we're a long-term investment, if we have a long-term investment time horizons, we don't want to buy at the peak of the cycle now because the area was stagnating for 5 or 6 years thereafter. Okay, so in order for us to actually pinpoint the best area, we first have to know which metrics actually carry higher significance in response to what we are trying to do. And at HtAG, there are 3 levels. There's level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 being the most important metrics which are highly correlated to an outcome, okay? And you assign significant scores to all of these metrics on the basis of their level and what they're trying to produce. And by doing that's when you can have a pretty nuanced ranking and comparison. I just want to show you something. I'll need to log in. So we have a DEX ranking system on the platform. See, it first addresses the brief, and then it points you to the right strategy for that brief. And you realize if I pick different budgets, if I pick different hold periods, different equity extraction timeframes, it will actually assign a completely different strategy. And when I click on it, what this module does is inadvertently ranks all of the suburbs for you. And how does it do that? It has a weighting score. You'll see here, if you go to say to Pro, there's about 200 different indicators here that you can rank on and assign significant scores to really have a nuanced output. Okay, so coming back to what we are talking about, analytics is one thing, having yields, growth rates, days on market, but you got to produce intelligence. And to produce intelligence, you have to understand the hierarchy of metrics, and then you have to combine those metrics into a narrative so you can rank the suburbs appropriately. And this is where the notion of opportunity cost becomes very important. What is opportunity cost? You can have a short list, but in that short list, one will deliver an average of 15% annually, the other one will deliver 7%. So there is a substantial difference between 7 and 15, and that difference is the opportunity cost. Hence why you need to rank them to know which one has the least opportunity cost, and this is when you can make the right decision. So data tells you what it costs, intelligence tells you whether to buy it. That's very important. I hope this helped, guys. Take care.